The day I walked into my wedding hall, I saw my sister wearing my dress. I can still hear the gasps, the whispers slicing through the music. Every step she took down that aisle felt like a knife across my heart. My dream, something I had waited years for, was walking past me on someone else's body. And that someone was my own sister, Chloe. People say betrayal hurts most when it comes from strangers. They are wrong. It's when it comes from the ones who share your blood, the ones who smile at your face while planning your humiliation behind closed doors. That's the kind of betrayal that never leaves you. I stood frozen at the entrance, clutching the bouquet that suddenly felt useless. My breath trembled. My mother's eyes met mine for a second, cold, unbothered. She looked away as if nothing was wrong, as if this wasn't my wedding, my moment, my dress. I could hear the guests murmuring. "Isn't that Lydia's gown?" one woman whispered. "No, it must be a coincidence," another replied. But I knew. I knew every thread, every pearl, every hour I spent designing that gown with my best friend. It wasn't just fabric, it was a piece of me. Chloe smiled as if she owned the world, as if she hadn't ripped mine apart. Her eyes found mine across the crowd, and for a second, she smirked. Just a small, smug curve of her lips. And that was the moment something inside me broke. I wanted to scream, to walk up to her and tear that stolen dream off her body. But I couldn't. Not there. Not in front of everyone. That's what they wanted, to see me lose control, to make me the dramatic sister, the bitter one. So I swallowed my pain. I stood still while the music played on, my heart pounding louder than the drums. I smiled, a small, bitter smile, and whispered to myself, "Not today. But one day, they'll all know the truth." Because this wasn't just about a dress. It was about years of being silenced, overshadowed, and pushed aside in the name of family pride. It was about a mother who only saw beauty in one daughter, and a sister who took advantage of that blindness. That day, as everyone admired her, I quietly made a promise to myself. They stole my dream, but I'll make sure they never forget who it truly belonged to. And that was the moment my revenge began. People say our family was perfect. The Harpers, polite, respectable, and always smiling in public. On the outside, we looked like one of those families you see in magazines, a big white house, weekend barbecues, and matching smiles for every photo. But behind those smiles, there were cracks. Tiny ones at first, quiet comments, comparisons, the kind that sound harmless until they start echoing in your mind for years. My mother, Evelyn Harper, loved to say, "A good family never shows its flaws." And she meant it. Feelings were swept under rugs, pain was hidden behind polite laughter, and anyone who broke that rule became the problem. Growing up, I tried to be her definition of a good daughter. Polite, educated, measured. But Chloe, she never had to try. She was born glowing. The kind of girl who didn't have to ask for attention. It found her. Teachers adored her. Relatives spoiled her. Mom treated her like a crown jewel. At family dinners, it was always the same routine. I'd help Mom set the table while Chloe scrolled on her phone, pretending to be tired. But when Dad walked in, his first words were always, "There's my sunshine." And of course, he meant her. I'd smile anyway. I always did. Dinner conversations revolved around Chloe's modeling dreams, her new photo shoots, her beauty contests. Every time I mentioned something about my design work, Mom would nod distractedly. "That's nice, dear," she'd say, already turning back to Chloe's stories. Once, I showed her my sketchbook, the very first draft of the wedding gown I'd later design for myself. I'd stayed up half the night drawing it. She flipped through a few pages and smiled. "It's sweet," she said. "But don't you think that neckline's a bit plain? Your sister would never wear something so simple." I laughed it off. But that comment stayed with me. Somehow, even my dreams were compared to Chloe. Our family reunions were even worse. The relatives adored a good story, and Chloe gave them plenty. I was always the quiet one, the responsible one, the other daughter. That label stuck to me like a shadow. At one reunion, Aunt Maggie, Dad's older sister, leaned in and whispered, "You know, Lydia, you remind me of your grandmother. Quiet strength. Don't lose that." It was the first time someone had said something kind to me that didn't sound like a backhanded compliment. But before I could even thank her, Mom called from across the room. "Chloe, dear, come take a picture with everyone." I watched as Chloe posed, glowing under the fairy lights, with everyone laughing around her. And me?
I was the one holding the camera. Again.
When I met Daniel, my fiancé, things felt different for the first time.
He saw me, really saw me.
He noticed the small things, how I fidgeted when nervous, how I bit my lip when thinking, how I smiled when sketching.
He didn't care about glamour or perfection. For once, I wasn't invisible.
I'll never forget the first time I introduced him to my family. I was nervous, desperate for them to like him. At dinner, Daniel complimented my cooking. "Lydia's lasagna is amazing," he said with a smile.
Mom laughed lightly. She gets that from me. But you should try Chloe's desserts next time.
She's quite the baker. Chloe giggled, brushing her hair aside. "Oh, stop, Mom."
But she didn't stop. She loved every second of it.
Daniel just smiled politely, not realizing that's how it always was. My moments turned into hers. After dinner, Dad patted Daniel's shoulder.
"You've got yourself a good girl.
Just be patient with her. Lydia takes things to heart." I laughed, but deep down, that line stung. Why was caring always a weakness in this family? Nora, my best friend, used to warn me. "You let them walk over you too much, LYD. You're too kind for your own good."
She wasn't wrong.
I believed if I stayed calm, if I worked harder, maybe one day my family would look at me and finally see me. And when Daniel proposed, I thought that day had come. Everyone congratulated me, even Chloe, with that sweet, harmless smile. But later that night, when we were alone, she said, "I didn't think you'd be the first to get married." Her tone was light, but her eyes, they weren't. I laughed it off again, like I always did.
But something in me shifted.
The weeks that followed were filled with wedding preparations. My mother took charge of everything, from the guest list to the floral arrangements. But when it came to my dress, I refused to let anyone else decide. I wanted something that represented me, not perfection, not approval, just me.
So I asked Nora to help me design it.
We spent hours sketching, sewing, laughing. It wasn't just a dress, it was a promise to myself, that this time, I'd stand in my own light. Mom didn't approve of the simplicity. "You could wear something grander, you know. Maybe take inspiration from Chloe's style."
I smiled. "No, Mom.
This one's mine."
She sighed but didn't argue.
Still, there was something strange in her tone when she said, "As long as you're happy, dear." The night before the rehearsal dinner, the family gathered for one last celebration at home. Laughter, music, the smell of roast chicken, it all felt so normal.
Too normal.
Chloe sat beside Mom, whispering, glancing at me now and then. When I caught her eyes, she smiled, that same sweet, harmless smile I'd seen all my life. Dad raised a toast. "To family, the greatest blessing we have."
Glasses clinked. Smiles glowed.
But as I looked around that table, something in my chest tightened. It felt like everyone was acting in a play, and I was the only one who didn't know my lines. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, I walked into the living room to grab my bag. That's when I heard it, faint laughter from Chloe's room, her voice muffled through the wall.
"Mom, don't worry," she said softly, almost giggling.
"I'll make sure everything looks perfect that day."
I froze. What did she mean by that?
I didn't know it then, but that single line was the first thread unraveling everything I thought I knew about my family. They say every family hides something behind their smiles. For us, that something started to show the moment my wedding planning became too real. When decisions weren't just about flowers or cake, but about pride, control, and power. The tension began quietly, like a shadow in the corner of the room. Mom had always managed everything, birthdays, holidays, even my graduation party, but I wanted to plan this wedding on my own.
My wedding. My choice.
My identity. That didn't sit well with her. One evening, we sat in the living room surrounded by invitation samples and decor catalogs. "I'm thinking of having the ceremony in the garden," I said softly, showing her a layout I had designed.
She frowned.
"Too plain, Lydia. People expect grandeur from our family." Chloe, sitting cross-legged on the couch, smirked. "Maybe she wants it plain so no one notices the decorations more than her dress." Mom chuckled. "Oh, Chloe, don't tease your sister." But her tone wasn't defensive, it was indulgent, like she secretly agreed. I laughed politely, pretending it didn't hurt.
But inside, my stomach twisted.
Every suggestion I made was somehow wrong. Too simple, too modest, too dull. And every time Chloe spoke, everyone listened. When I mentioned having Nora as my maid of honor, Mum's face tightened. "Sweetheart," she said, lowering her voice, "people will talk.
Nora's not family.
It should be your sister." I froze. "But, Chloe and we've never." "Exactly," Mum interrupted. "This will be good for you too. Bring you closer."
Closer?
The word felt like a cruel joke. Days passed, and small things began to disappear from my room. A pair of earrings, a bracelet Daniel gave me, small sketches from my design book.
I thought maybe I misplaced them.
Until one day, I saw Chloe wearing my earrings in a photo she posted online. "Nice earrings," I said when I confronted her later.
She smiled.
"Oh, those.
I found them in the drawer. You never wear them."
They were mine. "Everything in this house is ours," she said calmly, sipping her coffee. The audacity in her tone burned through me.
But again, I stayed silent. Arguing with Chloe was like shouting into the wind.
The louder I spoke, the more invisible I became. As the wedding drew nearer, I started noticing whispers around the family. Uncle Bruce pulled me aside one evening. "Your mother mentioned you're using the Harper House fund for the reception."
I blinked. What? No.
"Daniel and I are paying for everything ourselves."
His brows furrowed. That's odd.
"Evelyn said the inheritance fund is being used for Chloe's engagement next spring."
My heart dropped. Inheritance fund? Engagement? I had never even heard about this fund.
Dad had mentioned years ago that Grandma left a small amount for the daughters' futures, but nothing more.
That night, I asked Mom about it.
"Mom, what's this inheritance Uncle Bruce mentioned?"
Her expression hardened. "Oh, that. It's not important, Lydia."
"You don't need to worry." "Not important,"
I said, trying to stay calm.
"If Grandma left something for both of us."
She cut me off. "Your sister needs it more right now. You're marrying well, Lydia.
You'll be taken care of."
Her words hit me like a slap. Taken care of. As if my worth depended on who I married.
"Is that what I am to you?" I asked quietly. "A burden that needs taking care of." She sighed, already bored of the conversation.
"Don't be dramatic."
"You always make things emotional." I walked out before she could see the tears forming in my eyes. That night, I sat in my room staring at my wedding sketchbook. The dress, the one I had poured my heart into, was finally coming to life.
Nora had sent me photos from her studio.
It was perfect, simple yet regal, exactly the way I imagined. For once, something was going right.
Until the phone rang. It was Nora. Her voice was tense.
"Lydia, did you send someone to pick up your dress early?"
My chest tightened. "No. Why?" "There was a woman here today. She said she was your assistant. She signed your name and took the dress."
"What?"
I could barely breathe.
"What did she look like?"
"Tall, long hair, expensive perfume."
"She left in a silver car."
My stomach turned to ice. Chloe drove a silver car. I hung up and rushed downstairs.
Chloe was in the living room, laughing at something on her phone. "Where's my dress?"
I demanded.
She looked up, confused, or pretending to be. "What dress?"
"My wedding dress."
"You took it."
She raised an eyebrow.
"You're accusing me? Lydia, that's pathetic." Mom appeared from the kitchen, frowning. "What's going on?"
"She stole my wedding dress."
I shouted, my voice breaking. Mom's tone went cold. "Don't raise your voice in this house." She pretended to be my assistant and took it."
Mom crossed her arms. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Chloe wouldn't do something like that." "She did."
"Nora saw her." "Enough."
Mom snapped. "You're ruining the peace again. Always so emotional, Lydia. Always assuming the worst."
Chloe folded her arms, feigning innocence. "If it means that much to you, I'll help you look for it."
That mocking smile on her face. I'll never forget it. I felt my throat tighten.
"You don't need to help me. You've done enough." Her eyes glinted. "Oh, sister. You really think everyone's against you, don't you?" Dad entered, sensing the tension. "What's happening now?"
Mom sighed dramatically. "Lydia's upset about her dress.
She thinks Chloe took it."
Dad frowned.
I'm sure it's just a mistake. Maybe the boutique misplaced it. I looked between them, my whole family, standing there, defending her, gaslighting me.
Something inside me broke.
I can't do this anymore, I said quietly. I can't keep pretending we're a happy family when all you ever do is make me feel small.
Silence.
Mom's voice softened, dangerous and calm. You're being ungrateful, Lydia. We've given you everything. I laughed bitterly through tears. Everything but respect. I left the room shaking, feeling like a ghost in my own house. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number.
You'll see your dress soon.
Be patient.
No name.
No explanation.
But I didn't need one. I already knew whose hands it was in.
And I knew, whatever was coming next would destroy more than just my wedding.
It would expose the truth about what my family really was.
Silence became my survival. After the night of the dress, I learned there was no point in arguing. Every word I said turned into proof of how emotional I was. Every time I cried, it became a story Chloe told others about how fragile I'd become.
So I stopped defending myself. I smiled when I needed to. I nodded when I was expected to.
And slowly, I began to disappear.
But silence doesn't mean peace.
It means pressure, and one day, that pressure cracks everything. The next week, Mom invited everyone over for a family dinner. A warm gathering before the wedding, she said. I knew what that meant, another stage for Chloe to shine while I stood in the background pretending to enjoy the show. When I walked into the dining room, Chloe was already there, sitting in my seat beside Mom, her arm draped over her chair like she owned it. She wore my missing earrings again, the ones I'd stopped asking about. Oh, Lydia, Mom said, smiling thinly. You're late. I had to take a call from Nora.
She still hasn't located the dress. Mom waved her hand.
Let's not ruin dinner with drama.
Sit down, dear. I sat across from Chloe. She poured herself wine and smirked.
Still stressing about that dress, she said softly. Maybe it wasn't meant for you.
I froze.
What's that supposed to mean? She shrugged. Just saying, maybe fate has other plans. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, Dad started talking about the wedding guest list.
Chloe helped your mother finalize everything, he said proudly.
I looked at her. You did?
She smiled sweetly. Of course.
Mom asked me to take care of the details since you've been so overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. The word burned in my ears.
As they continued chatting, I realized something horrifying. Chloe had taken over everything. The guest list, the seating chart, even the music selection. She was planning my wedding. And everyone acted like it was normal. When I couldn't take it anymore, I excused myself to the kitchen to breathe.
Aunt Maggie followed me in quietly.
She whispered, You okay, sweetheart? I forced a smile. Just tired. Her eyes softened.
You remind me of your grandmother.
She used to say, silence is dignity until it becomes self-destruction.
I swallowed hard.
What do I do, Aunt Maggie?
She sighed.
They'll keep pushing until you stop letting them. Before I could respond, Chloe's voice rang from the dining room.
Lydia. Mom says bring the dessert.
It's burning.
I rushed out, but the moment I stepped into the room, everyone turned to look at me. Smoke drifted from the kitchen door.
The cake, the one I baked for the night, was burning in the oven.
Chloe laughed, covering her mouth.
Oh no, poor thing. You were so sure you could handle this yourself. Laughter rippled around the table. Soft, polite, cruel.
Even Dad smiled awkwardly. My hands trembled. I was talking to Aunt Maggie.
Mom interrupted. Excuses don't matter, dear. The guests will remember the smoke, not your explanation. The humiliation stung worse than the smell of burnt sugar. After that night, things only got worse. Rumors started to spread, small, cutting lies whispered behind my back. Relatives began asking strange questions. So, Lydia, I heard you're struggling to pay for the venue. I thought you designed dresses. Why didn't you make your own? Each word felt like a pin pressed into my skin.
I knew who was behind it.
Chloe always had a way of twisting truth into poison. And yet, I had no proof, just the sinking feeling that everything around me was being rewritten.
Even Daniel started noticing.
Lydia, what's going on? He asked one night as we sat in his car. I hesitated.
It's Chloe. She's trying to take over everything.
The dress, the wedding, The story.
He frowned.
I'm sure she doesn't mean harm. I looked at him, kind, innocent, unaware. He didn't understand what it felt like to be gaslit by your own blood. I forced a smile. You're right. Maybe I'm just tired.
But inside, I was screaming.
The final straw came during our bridal brunch. Mom organized it at a fancy restaurant downtown, a day to celebrate the bride, she said. But when I arrived, it felt more like Chloe's event than mine. She was at the center table, surrounded by guests, telling stories about her sister's big day.
When I approached, a few women turned toward me awkwardly.
One whispered, "Oh, you're the bride."
I felt my face flush. Yes, I'm Lydia. Chloe giggled.
Oh, don't mind them. I've just been doing so much of the prep that they probably thought. Thought what?
I cut in. She tilted her head.
That I was you. The table erupted in polite laughter.
I stared at her, fighting back tears.
She wanted this, to erase me, bit by bit, until I was nothing but a name on a wedding invitation. I excused myself to the restroom, gripping the sink to keep from breaking down. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the woman I used to be. My eyes looked tired, hollow. I whispered to my reflection, "Why are you letting them do this to you?" And for the first time, I didn't have an answer.
That evening, Nora called me. Her voice was shaking.
"Lydia, I don't know how to tell you this," she said, "but your dress, I saw someone wearing it today."
I froze. What? Where?
At the boutique. There was a fitting event for a charity gala. And Chloe Harper was there, in your gown.
My heart dropped.
You're sure? I designed it with you, Lydia. I know that dress like my own reflection.
The room started spinning.
Everything, every humiliation, every whisper, suddenly made sense.
She wasn't just mocking me. She was preparing for something.
That night, I confronted Mom again.
Did you know Chloe has my dress? She looked up from her tablet.
What are you talking about? She wore it today. Nora saw her. Mom sighed heavily, as if I were a child. Lydia, must you always create drama? Chloe borrowed it for a photo shoot. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal.
I snapped. It's my wedding dress.
Lower your voice, she warned. Why can't you see what she's doing to me? Because, Mom said coldly, you're making everything about yourself again.
That sentence broke me more than the theft ever could.
Later that night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the empty hanger where my dress once hung. My body felt numb, but my mind was racing. I heard laughter downstairs, Chloe and Mom watching something, carefree, unbothered. I whispered to myself, you wanted peace, Lydia.
You gave them silence.
And they took it as permission.
Then, my phone buzzed again.
Another message from that same unknown number.
Don't worry.
You'll see the dress again, on a day you'll never forget. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Something in me shifted that night, a sharp, dangerous stillness. Because if they wanted a show, I was finally ready to give them one. And that was the moment I stopped being the quiet daughter. There's a strange silence that follows betrayal, a silence so deep it feels like your heart stops beating for a moment. That's exactly what I felt the morning of my wedding. The sun was bright, cruelly bright. Everything around me sparkled. The flowers, the decorations, even the air seemed to hum with celebration. Yet inside me, there was only dread. Something in my gut told me this day wasn't going to end the way it was meant to. I arrived at the venue early, wearing a simple white robe, my hair half done. Nora was supposed to bring a replacement dress, one she'd managed to put together in a rush after mine disappeared. It wasn't the same, but at least it was something. I tried to focus on that. Tried to stay calm. But when I stepped into the bridal suite, Mom and Chloe were already there.
Morning, sweetheart, Mom said, her voice sugar-sweet.
You're glowing. Chloe stood by the mirror, already dressed, in something white.
Something familiar. My breath caught. It was my gown.
The same ivory silk, the same lace neckline, the same hand-sewn pearls.
My dream. My design.
Do you like it? She asked, turning slightly so I could see the train. It fits me perfectly, doesn't it?
I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. My throat burned.
That's my wedding dress, I finally whispered.
She smiled like I'd complimented her.
Oh, this old thing? Mom said it was too beautiful to waste after you cancelled the original boutique order. I never cancelled anything.
I snapped. Mom frowned. Lower your voice, Lydia.
You're being hysterical again. Hysterical.
I could feel tears rising.
You let her steal my dress.
Mom's tone sharpened.
Enough. Chloe's wearing it for the pre-ceremony photos. It's already been arranged. You can change afterward.
My entire world tilted.
You mean she's wearing my dress in my wedding photos?
Chloe's voice was calm, amused. Relax, sis. I'm helping you.
You looked stressed, so I told Mom I'd handle the shoot for you.
For me? My voice broke.
You took everything, my dress, my respect, and you call it help.
She shrugged, studying herself in the mirror. You've always been too emotional.
Maybe people just need to see a calmer face representing the family. Something inside me cracked then, not like a snap, but like glass slowly giving way under pressure. The photographer arrived a few minutes later.
He looked between us awkwardly.
Miss Harper, which one?
Mom smiled tightly. Take photos of Chloe first.
Lydia will join later.
And just like that, I was pushed aside, again.
They moved to the garden, posing under the floral arch I had designed, Chloe glowing like the bride she always wanted to be.
Guests began arriving early, whispering as they saw her posing in white.
Isn't that Lydia's gown?
Maybe it's part of the plan.
She looks stunning, doesn't she?
Each word felt like a dagger. I stood near the doorway, numb, clutching the bouquet that was meant for me. Nora arrived, out of breath, holding the emergency dress. But when she saw Chloe in my gown, her eyes widened in horror. Oh my God. Lydia, she whispered.
She actually did it.
I nodded, silent. Nora grabbed my arm.
You can't let her get away with this.
Not here, I said quietly. Not now.
Because in that moment, I realized they wanted me to explode, to lose control, to scream, to look ungrateful and unstable in front of everyone.
I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. So I smiled.
A thin, cold smile that even I didn't recognize.
But fate has a cruel sense of timing.
As the ceremony began, the whispers grew louder. The officiant looked confused, glancing at Chloe, then at me, standing off to the side in a different gown.
Who's the bride? Someone murmured. The question sliced through the air like thunder.
Mom's face paled. Dad looked furious, embarrassed, not at Chloe, but at me.
Can't you just play along? He hissed.
You're ruining everything.
I turned to him, disbelief flooding me.
You think I'm ruining this?
Chloe stepped closer, pretending to console me. Please, Lydia, don't make a scene.
People are watching. I looked at her, really looked, the false sympathy in her eyes, the calculated tilt of her head.
And I realized this wasn't just jealousy. It was a performance she'd been rehearsing for years. This was her moment. She didn't just want attention. She wanted to be me. And my family was letting her.
When the officiant finally began, the tension was unbearable.
Chloe sat in the front row, still in my dress, still smiling.
Every vow I spoke felt hollow, every glance around the room a reminder of what had been stolen. When the ceremony ended, the guests clapped politely, but I could see confusion in their faces. Some congratulated me awkwardly, others whispered to Chloe. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Mom raised her glass for a toast. To family, she said proudly, and to my 2 daughters, Chloe, who's been such a blessing through all this chaos, and Lydia, who's finally found her peace.
Her peace. The words stung like venom.
As the guests clapped, I caught sight of Aunt Maggie. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes met mine, and she mouthed, "I'm sorry."
That's when I knew she knew everything. After dinner, Daniel tried to comfort me. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," he said gently. I laughed bitterly. "Daniel, my sister wore my wedding dress at my wedding.
How much clearer can it get?"
He sighed, looking helpless.
"I just don't want you to lose yourself over this."
I looked at him, kind, patient, but detached. Maybe I already have. I walked outside to breathe, the night air cold against my skin. For a few minutes, the noise of the crowd faded behind me. Then I heard laughter. Chloe's voice. I turned. She was talking to a group of guests, showing off the hem of my gown. "Lydia didn't mind," she said sweetly. "She's always been generous." She knows I look better in it anyway. The group laughed.
I stood there in the shadows, watching them mock me, watching her bask in it. My heart didn't ache anymore, it burned. Nora found me minutes later. "Lydia," she whispered, "you don't have to stay."
But I shook my head. No.
I do. Because I wanted to remember this feeling, every sting, every humiliation, every tear I refused to let fall.
I wanted to carve it into my memory.
Because one day, I was going to make sure none of them ever forgot it either. The night ended with polite applause, fake smiles, and hollow goodbyes. I drove home alone, still in the backup gown, staring at my reflection in the car window.
I didn't look like a bride. I looked like a ghost of one.
When I got home, there was an envelope on my bed. Inside was a letter, signed by my parents. "Dear Lydia, we've decided to transfer your portion of Grandma's inheritance to Chloe. It makes sense given her upcoming engagement and her contributions to the family's social obligations.
We hope you understand.
Love, Mom and Dad."
The world went quiet.
Not even the clock ticking in the hallway could break the silence. They had taken everything. My dress, my moment, my inheritance, my respect. I sank to the floor, clutching that letter, sobbing until my throat hurt. For hours, I felt nothing but grief for a family that never loved me the way I loved them. But somewhere in that silence, as the tears dried on my cheeks, a new emotion rose, slow, heavy, and cold.
Not pain, not sadness. Resolve.
The next morning, I woke up different. My hands were steady.
My voice calm.
The kind of calm that comes after a storm, when the wreckage is clear and you finally know what must be rebuilt. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a box beside my sketchbook, the same sketchbook I used to design that dress.
Then I whispered to myself.
They wanted to take my name, my worth, my dignity, but they forgot something. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, tired eyes, but sharp. "They taught me how to stay quiet," I said softly. "Now, they're going to learn what silence can do when it speaks back."
And that was the moment my grief turned to purpose. The moment I stopped asking for respect.
The moment I decided, justice will come, and it will wear my name. For the first time since they took everything, I slept without waking to the taste of panic in my mouth. Not because the pain had left, it sat like a hard stone in my chest, but because the panic had been replaced by something colder, steadier, a plan. Grief loosens your edges, purpose sharpens them. I began to feel whole again, not because the world had been kind, but because I decided it would answer for what it had done.
I told Nora everything in the small hours. She didn't cry.
She lit a cigarette, the kind of thing she never did in front of me before, and said, "Then let's make them watch." That was the first time I stopped being the quiet woman and started being a person with an agenda. Aunt Maggie, when I confided in her next, didn't offer platitudes. She wrote down dates, names, places. "You don't get justice by feeling," she said. "You get it by building a story that survives their lies."
So I built one.
First, I gathered proof the way a sculptor gathers stone. I needed receipts, footage, signatures, the small, boring things that sting less than a tear but cut raw. Nora went back to the boutique under the pretense of a new commission and convinced the manager to talk. He was embarrassed at first, but when I offered to promise discretion and protect his job, he began to spill the breadcrumb trail, a falsified pickup form, a silver car plate number, a bartender who remembered a woman with a vampy perfume. Aunt Maggie found an old letter from Grandma referencing the fund and a ledger entry Dad had misplaced. I made copies. Every paper was a nail. I recorded conversations, not because I wanted to ruin anyone for the thrill of it, but because words warp in a rumor mill. A voice on a recording cannot shrug and say, "Oh, you misheard." A voice can be played in front of people who remember differently. I tried to be careful, legal, immovable. The idea wasn't to break the law, it was to protect myself from theirs. Daniel wanted to sue. He wanted blood and lawyers and immediate exposure. I had to calm him. "Not yet," I told him. "If we rush, they'll bury us in noise." He looked at me like I'd grown a backbone overnight. "You're different," he said. "This calm scares me." I smiled. "Good. Let it scare them more." There were quieter, riskier moves. I reached out to a reporter I vaguely knew through a charity gala and asked questions without answering any. I contacted a small firm that handled reputation management, not for me to fix my image, but so I could learn how they bury things. I learned how stories are bought and sold, how a well-timed whisper can look like a confession. I absorbed that like fuel. I created contingencies. If the family tried to silence witnesses, I had duplicates stored with a lawyer friend. If emotion would be their defense, we would use documents to make them mute. If pity would distract the crowd, we would give them proof and a timeline. The plan had to be undeniable and elegant, like the dress I'd designed. Simple on the surface, brutal in its structure. People underestimated me because I'd trained myself to be small. I used that against them. I let them think I was still the quiet one while Nora and Aunt Maggie worked 2 steps ahead. I let Chloe parade and preen, thinking her armor was impenetrable. The shock value would be greater that way. When the truth emerged, it would land harder because it came from the person they thought was harmless. There were moments when fear crept in, not the gnawing panic anymore, but a legal, ethical worry. Was I becoming the kind of person who destroys to avenge? I checked myself in those nights, reading the old sketchbooks, the cards Daniel had written, the tiny proof of who I was beneath their cruelty. My revenge had to be about truth and respect, not rage. If I lost that, I'd be as ruined as they wanted me. Still, I took certain risks. I arranged to meet a boutique employee after hours. I bought the call records I couldn't get otherwise. I left anonymous notes for a few relatives who I knew had doubts. I planted seeds of curiosity in people who mattered. Aunt Maggie's friends, the photographer's assistant, the woman who arranged the charity gala Chloe coveted. Each small conversation was a stitch. At the end of 6 weeks, I had a file, dates, receipts, photos, recorded confessions, a chain of who did what and when. I had a narrative that showed not only the theft but the pattern, favoritism, financial maneuvering, the casual violence of being ignored until you don't behave the way they want. I even had the inheritance paperwork Aunt Maggie dug out, showing the transfer that looked polite on paper and criminal in context. I sat with that file at night, feeling the weight of it like a sleeping animal. I didn't want to use it like a weapon for humiliation, but I wanted them to understand the cost of what they'd done. I placed one copy with a lawyer who nodded in approval. Another copy I encrypted and sent to a friend who ran a small local news site, not to blow it wide, but to be ready if the legal route faltered. I wanted options, not theater. The final move required me to be patient, and patience is cruel when you want to strike. I booked a family dinner at the old house, the house where every photograph pretended to be happy. I sent invitations that looked innocent, old friends, relatives, a few faces I knew would be listening. I arranged for a short surprise presentation at the end, something my mother would never suspect. I scheduled the lawyer to be in town that night just in case, and Nora agreed to bring a few silent witnesses. When I typed the last line of the invitation and hit send, my hands shook. I told myself I could back out. I told myself I didn't have to drag my wounds into the light. But the file on my lap felt alive. It wanted justice. It wanted respect. And I realized I wanted to see their faces when the truth was finally undeniable. I stood up from my desk and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was the same one who had designed a dress out of hope, but now her eyes held a different kind of promise. I'm ready, I said aloud. Aunt Maggie called right after and whispered, they'll never see it coming. I closed my eyes, listening to the echo of that small certainty. Then I opened them and picked up my phone. Outside, somewhere down the street, Chloe laughed with friends, unaware. Inside, my chest thrummed like a drum. The night I would show the file drew closer, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt the sick, sweet taste of control. I walked to the window and stared at the house where my father slept, where my mother pretended. I touched the envelope with the transferred inheritance and slipped it into my bag. I didn't know if I would have the courage to press play when the moment came. But I had already built the stage. And when the night arrived, there would be no room left for their polite smiles. The dining room glowed like a stage. Crystal glasses, heavy silver, candles standing like sentries. Family portraits watched from the walls, all those frozen smiles, all those years of pretending. I stood at the head of the table with my hands steady at my sides. Nora sat near the end, quiet, eyes on me. Aunt Maggie rested 2 fingers on her teacup, a private signal, ready. Daniel's jaw was set. My parents took their seats like royalty. Chloe floated in a white silk blouse, luminous and confident, the picture of innocence. Before dessert, I said, voice calm, I'd like to say something. Mom's smile tightened. Keep it brief, Lydia. We have guests. Chloe leaned back. Don't worry, sis. I'll help you if words get too heavy.
I nodded once to Nora. She dimmed the lights and tapped the remote. The room blinked, then the wall bloomed with a video. Not music. Not a slideshow of vacations and posed laughter. A document camera. A date stamp. My voice, recorded and clear. This is the pickup form from the boutique. Signature line, Lydia Harper. But the camera above the counter shows the person who signed. The footage rolled. A woman with long hair. The vampy perfume note almost wafted off the screen. She lifted the pen, laughed, and scribbled my name with a practiced curve. From the table, a soft gasp. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Chloe's chair scraped. "Turn this off." I clicked the remote again. Freeze frame. Her face, exposed in the blue glow. Not a rumor. Not an accusation. The truth. "I didn't do that," Chloe said, halfway laughing. "You can edit anything." "Then listen," I replied. The speakers filled with the boutique manager's voice. She said she was the bride's assistant. Same last name. Silva Lexus. Plate ending in 17 Quetzales. Aunt Maggie slid a printed photo across the table, the car in our driveway, the plate shining under the streetlight. Uncle Bruce muttered, "My God." Dad's eyes darted, calculating. Mom's smile shut down, brittle as glass. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. I looked at her. "Mistakes don't sign my name. Mistakes don't wear my dress." The next clip played. A voice note, saved, stripped of all excuses. Chloe, on her phone, laughing. "She won't even fight back, Mom. She never does. I'll make sure everything looks perfect." Silence collapsed over the table like a curtain. Daniel leaned forward. "Enough." Chloe's chin lifted. "You're twisting everything." I was saving her from embarrassment. She was overwhelmed. "Overwhelmed," I repeated softly. "Then let's see who decided that for me." On screen, the inheritance ledger appeared. Grandma's loopy handwriting at the bottom, and the instruction she once wrote to Aunt Maggie, equal parts. Dignity belongs to both girls. Then the transfer slip, my share rerouted, signed not by me but by Richard Harper as temporary guardian of family interest, co-signed by Evelyn Harper, annotated with a note, Chloe's engagement, family obligations. I could feel my heart hammering, but my voice stayed level. I was never asked. I was never told. I was just erased. Dad broke first. "It's not like that." "How is it then?" I asked. "Because it looks like theft." Mom clasped her hands, a queen performing grief. "We made a hard choice. We protected our family's reputation." I let the word hang between us, reputation, like a knife. "You ruined mine." The next slide, messages from relatives who'd heard things. Bride can't afford venue. Sister stepping in to help. The lies paraded in their neat bubbles, each a small cut, now visible and undeniable. Aunt Maggie cleared her throat. "Evelyn, I warned you. You told me to stay out of house matters." She looked at me then, eyes burning. "But these are not house matters. These are human ones." Chloe stood, palms out. "Do you all hear yourselves? This is insane. Lydia's making a spectacle because she's jealous." I met her gaze. "You wanted a show. I'm giving you the truth." Nora clicked again. The footage changed. The charity gala rehearsal. There was Chloe, my dress alive under the lights, the hem brushing a stage it was never meant to touch. And then, the clearest cut, her reflection captured in a mirror as she whispered to a stylist, "It's her design, but it looks better on me." Laughter had greeted that line when I heard it the first time. Tonight, the room was a grave. Dad's voice shook. "Turn this off right now." "No," I said. "We finish." The final piece wasn't a document. It was my grandmother. A short clip Aunt Maggie had kept, a home video, grainy, warm. Grandma sat at the piano with two little girls squeezing beside her. "Respect," she said, tapping our noses, "is the only dress that never goes out of style." I felt my throat ache. I let it. I turned the lights back on. Faces were pale in the candle glow. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I stood in the center and spoke the one thing they had always denied me. "You exposed me. You humiliated me. You destroyed the one day that should have belonged to me. You took my inheritance. You took my voice. But you never took my memory. Tonight, I return everything you took. In front of the people you tried to impress." Mom's mask cracked. What do you want?
Respect, I said. And repair.
My lawyer rose from the far corner, a quiet man with a neat folder.
Murmurs rippled. I continued, voice steady.
Option 1, a written apology, signed and dated, acknowledging the dress theft, the false signature, the hush around the fund. Full return of my inheritance with interest.
A public correction to the relatives you misled.
And Chloe issues a statement that the gown she wore was stolen, my design.
Chloe laughed, sharp and desperate.
You're blackmailing me.
No, I said.
I'm offering you mercy.
Dad glared.
And option 2. I nodded to the lawyer. He laid 3 envelopes on the table. Copies of the file, addressed to a state investigator, the boutique's legal counsel, and a local editor. The weight of paper landed like a gavel. I press play outside this room, I said, and the story leaves this house. Chloe looked at our parents, waiting for rescue. They had none.
Eyes avoided hers.
Aunt Maggie stared straight at me, and I felt her silent blessing.
This is disgusting, Mom hissed.
Family matters don't go public.
Secrets protect bullies, I replied. Not families.
Chloe leaned across the table, voice low. You wouldn't dare. I held her gaze. I already did. Everything's time-stamped and backed up. The only thing I haven't sent is the apology I'm willing to accept instead.
The room held its breath.
Daniel spoke softly, almost to himself. Let it end here. For a long moment, there was only the sound of a candle hissing.
Then Dad's shoulders sank.
His voice came out rough, scorched by pride. We'll fix the fund.
Mom's ring trembled against her glass. I won't be humiliated, she whispered.
No one moved as I stepped back from the head of the table. The candles flickered, painting the walls in quiet fire. Aunt Maggie lifted her chin, proud.
Nora's eyes shone.
Daniel exhaled. In the stunned hush, I heard my own heartbeat. Steady, unafraid. I looked at the portraits one last time, all those practiced smiles. Then I faced the only people who mattered in this moment, the ones who had called me weak and watched me drown. My name, I said softly, is not a costume to be stolen. And as the room bowed to the weight of that sentence, I knew the balance had shifted. The respect I was denied had finally come home, carrying the truth in both hands. You already are, I said, not unkindly. But you can choose what happens after.
Chloe's eyes shimmered. You set me up. No, I said. You set yourself up. I just turned on the light.
She swallowed, throat tight. For the first time, she looked small.
Not glamorous. Not untouchable. Just a girl in borrowed shine, the secret finally too heavy to carry. Say it, I told her gently.
Say what you did.
Her lips trembled. I took the dress.
And the signature.
A beat. A breath. Her voice cracked.
It was me.
The room exhaled.
Somewhere, a fork clinked against a plate. Shame painted her cheeks.
She didn't look at me. I turned to my parents.
And the fund. Dad nodded once, a king without a crown. It returns to you. With interest. Mom stared into the tablecloth like she could crawl inside it.
We'll write the apology, she said faintly. I closed the folder.
The power didn't feel sweet. It felt clean. Not a victory parade, but a room finally cleared of smoke.
I picked up the remote and slipped it into my pocket. Good, I said.
Because tonight, the lies are shut down.
The room stayed still long after the truth ended. No one clapped, no one shouted.
Just the quiet hum of shame, the kind that doesn't vanish when the lights come back on. The candles had burned low, wax dripped slowly onto the linen. Every flame flickered like it was struggling to stay alive, just like the family sitting under it.
I didn't speak again.
There was nothing left to explain. Everything that needed to be said had already been shown on that wall. Every lie, every betrayal, every mask, burned away by truth. Chloe sat hunched in her chair, her once perfect posture gone. Her lipstick was smudged, her hands trembled when she tried to reach for her glass. Mom stared at the tablecloth as if it could offer her an escape. Dad kept clearing his throat, but no sound came out. Aunt Maggie stood first. Well, she said quietly, I think the ghosts in this house finally have names. Then she turned to me and nodded. You did what they never thought you could. Tell the truth without losing your grace. Her words were the first warmth I'd felt in months. I took one last look at the table.
The table where I'd spent years sitting quietly, listening to laughter that never included me. And I felt free. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice calm. "Dinner's over."
I didn't shout. I didn't cry.
I simply turned, gathered my things, and walked out.
The air outside was cool, almost kind. For the first time, I could breathe.
Daniel followed me to the car, his footsteps hesitant. "Lydia," he whispered, "you really did it."
I smiled faintly.
"No," I said. "I just stopped pretending." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. He knew this wasn't victory.
It was clarity.
Justice isn't loud, it's quiet, steady, and absolute. We drove away in silence, the house shrinking behind us in the rearview mirror. Through the window, I saw Chloe run out into the yard, calling after me.
Her voice cracked.
"Lydia, wait."
But I didn't stop. Not out of cruelty.
Out of peace. There's nothing left to say when the truth is finally louder than the lies. In the days that followed, the calls began, apologies, excuses, long messages about family misunderstandings. Mom left voicemails filled with regret but never once used the words "I'm sorry." Dad wanted to meet for coffee to talk things through. Chloe sent one message: "I never meant to hurt you.
I just wanted to feel seen." I never replied.
Some people confuse forgiveness with amnesia.
But I didn't forget.
I simply refused to keep bleeding from the same wound.
Instead, I poured my focus into my work.
Nora and I reopened the design studio under a new name, Dignity Bridal Atelier. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brides came in, nervous and glowing, and I helped them build dresses not just for beauty, but for courage. Each gown I designed carried a hidden stitch, a personal reminder sewn beneath the fabric: respect yourself first.
Aunt Maggie visited often.
She'd sit by the window with tea, watching the dresses take shape. "You know," she'd say, "you didn't just fix your story. You fixed the way they'll remember you." And maybe she was right. Months later, an invitation arrived, Chloe's apology dinner. I held it for a while, studying the handwriting. Elegant, practiced.
But behind it, I could feel the same old performance. I folded it neatly and placed it in the trash. Some endings don't need witnesses.
Instead, I went for a walk near the lake, the same place I used to go when I was a child, when silence was the only space that belonged to me.
The water was still that evening.
The sky glowed pink and gold, like forgiveness in disguise. I sat on the bench and whispered to the reflection on the water. They tried to steal my name, my light, my worth. But I learned something: they can't take what you refuse to give. The wind carried the words away, soft but sure.
Later that night, I looked at my old sketchbook again.
Between its pages, I found the letter, creased, smudged, the one where they transferred everything to Chloe. I read it one last time, then tore it gently into pieces. The sound was almost beautiful, like closure made audible. I whispered, "I forgive you, not for you, but for me." Then I let the pieces fall into a small bowl, lit them, and watched them turn to ash.
The past doesn't vanish. It transforms.
A week later, Nora surprised me with something at the studio, a finished gown.
Simple, elegant, with my original design fully realized.
She smiled shyly.
"It's yours," she said.
"Not for a wedding. For victory."
I touched the fabric.
It shimmered in the light, soft, strong, alive.
Just like me.
We both laughed, and for the first time, it wasn't bitter laughter. It was free. The truth had cost me a family name, a false peace, a comfortable silence. But in return, it gave me something greater, myself. Sometimes revenge isn't fire.
It's clarity.
It's walking away without looking back, knowing they'll never find that quiet strength they tried to break in you. Because the deepest justice isn't seeing them fall, it's standing tall after they tried to bury you. That night, before closing the studio, I wrote a line on the wall, words that summed up everything I had learned. "When they steal your light, don't chase the thief.
Become the sunrise."